at noon of June 30th. While the threat level remains low, officials are taking no chances. Security is tight, with the PNP deploying more than 9,000 personnel for the event. We're going to go back to that story in just a bit. In the meantime, first, this story, the United States delegation to President-elect Marcos's inauguration will be led by the Vice President's husband, U.S. Second Gentleman Douglas M. Hoff, husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, will attend the event in U.S. President Joe Biden's stead. Marcos earlier invited Mr. Biden during the recent phone call when the U.S. President congratulated Marcos on his electoral win. Other members of Biden's delegation include Chargé d'Affaires Heather Variava of the U.S. Embassy here in Manila, as well as 4 other U.S. officials and the U.S. Director of the Asian Development Bank. Pack your raincoats and umbrellas if you're planning to attend the presidential inauguration on June 30th. Pag-asa forecasts gloomy weather on the day of the ceremony. The city of Manila, where the inauguration will take place, and the rest of the greater Metro Manila area will have scattered rain showers and thunderstorms on Thursday. These will be caused by the southwest monsoon or habagat. But Pag-asa says no tropical cyclone is seen to affect the country. CNN Philippines is your most trusted destination for the live coverage of the inauguration of the country's 17th president. We will bring that to you live as it happens this Thursday, June 30th, from the National Museum in Manila. Catch our special coverage beginning at 9 a.m. with senior anchor Pinky Webb and myself. Organizers are completing, like we said, the final touches on the National Museum. For a historian, the building symbolizes what he calls the country's complicated journey to independence and democracy. Rex Remigio tells us more.
President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Preparations are in full swing for the inauguration of incoming President Bongbong Marcos at the National Museum in Manila. Military bands are holding marching practices. Workers are painting metal grills and seats, welding metal parts of tents for VIP guests, and cleaning the surroundings from time to time. Aside from its beautiful architecture, the National Museum of Fine Arts has been a witness to some of the country's historical events. This is where Manuel L. Quezon held his inauguration as the first Commonwealth President under the United States. Historian Xiao Chua says the museum's neoclassical architectural style looks the same as the U.S. Capitol, while its Greco-Roman columns symbolize power rooted on Western democracy.
Parang paalala siya na pinattern sa Amerika ang inyong demokrasya at ang nagbigay sa inyo ng demokrasya, yung mga Amerikano. Para siyang reminder of our colonial past.
The National Museum is also where Jose P. Laurel was sworn in as president of the Japanese-sponsored Philippine Republic in 1943. Chua also notes that the Marcoses have personal memories at the National Museum. He says this is where Bongbong's parents, the late Ferdinand Marcos and former First Lady Imelda, met for the first time.
Doon nakita si Imelda Romualdez na kumakain doon. Siya ay pamangkin ni Speaker Daniel Romualdez, bumisita lang doon at nakita siya nung congressman ng Ilocos Norte na si Ferdinand Marcos.
The historian also says students held huge protests outside the venue during the first quarter storm in 1970, when the elder Marcos delivered his 5th State of the Nation address. The National Museum housed the Senate and House of Representatives at that time.
Yung mga alaala ng mga protesta, ng mga pagigiit natin ng kasarilan, yun ang sisidlan, yung gusaling yun. Kaya napakahalagang gusali. So sana hindi sayangin ng mga manunumpa.
Most importantly, Chua is hoping the structure would serve as a reminder for those who will take their oaths of office to not repeat the mistakes of the past. Rex Remigio, CNN Philippines.
No reprieve in sight for motorists with another fuel price hike taking effect tomorrow. Diesel prices will go up by 1 peso and 65 centavos per liter and gasoline by nearly 1 peso per liter. As for kerosene, motorists can expect a 10 centavo increase. Now, this marks the 5th straight hike of diesel and kerosene prices and the 4th for gasoline. Energy officials say a weak peso against the US dollar is keeping the local fuel costs high. Motorists in Metro Manila should brace for heavy traffic in Quezon City as authorities conduct repairs southbound of the EDSA commuting flyover. George Quiles walks us through the measures in place to ease traffic.
Motorists should allot longer travel time if they are passing through the southbound of EDSA Kamuning in Quezon City. With the closure of the flyover since Saturday, the traffic became much slower, with only 2 lanes of the service road passable. Add this problem to the soaring fuel prices.
Saan pa kayo usad pa doon, sir? Simula saan?
Simula Mesentris.
Okay. Sir, alam mo ba na ganito ang sitwasyon dito ngayon? Nasarado tong flyover?
Hindi po.
Grabe ang traffic boss, hanggang doon, lulo.
Alam niyo ba sarado tong ano?
Hindi po ngayon pa nakadaan dito eh.
Ay, sobra, lalo na galing ng Commonwealth. Halos wala na natitira sa...
Gaano kahaba? Alam niyo ba sir na sarado tong...
alam ko, kaya lang andito yung pasahero ko eh. No choice ako para siyempre hatid ko siya eh.
The Metro Manila Development Authority has deployed around 100 personnel to the area to manage the traffic and direct motorists towards alternate routes. Currently, vehicles coming from EDSA Quezon Avenue may turn right at Mother Ignacia Avenue, Panay Avenue, Scout Albano or Scout Borromeo streets to avoid a traffic jam. The MMDA has also posted alternate routes on their social media accounts.
Kung hindi po nila kaagad nakita itong ating abiso, pagpaumanhin nyo po, konting pangunawa, wag po tayo magsiksikan, magbigayan kung maaari dahil yan po yung mas mapapabilis yung takbo ng mga sasakyan.
Authorities say it may take them a month to finish the repairs, but they promise to try their best to finish earlier. That's if they will not find further damages on the flyover and if weather permits. George Quiles, CNN Philippines.
Coming up on Newsnight, outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo introduces the new face of the opposition to the incoming Marcos administration. And crash landing on new stars Sonia Jin and Hyun Bin are expecting a baby. You're watching CNN Philippines.
Handa na para sa pinaka-espesyal kong pasahero.
Ay, tara na! Natatandaan ko pa ng mga panahong naghihirap kami. Ito na kami ngayon. Buti na lang palaging nandyan si tatay para suportahan ako. Tinigawa na natin.
Dahil sa pagsisikap at tiwala sa Diyos, naging matagumpay ang ating pagtatapos.
Ang mabuting balita ay hatid sa inyo ng MX3.
Sa dami ng taong nakalipas, salamat dahil hindi niyo kami iniwan. Dahil sa inyong tulong, mas naging maayos ang akala namin nakalimutan na. Basta't nariyan kayo, alam naming hindi mapapabayaan ang aming paghihirap para sa sarili, sa pamilya, sa kapwa, at sa bansa. Kampante kami, basta't kasama kayo. Ano ang sikreto para special ang umaga? Dairy Cream. Mas malinamnam ang pandesal. Mas katakam-takam ang hain. At mas special ang bawat kagat.
Thank you, Ma! Ang sarap ng luto mo!
Dairy Cream. Pinipili ng mapiling ina.
Eyes on me everywhere, but I still take the dare. My game is always fair. I will always be impossible to beat. I will explore the comfortable, 'cause I
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Again, our top story, the country will see another change in leadership on Thursday, June 30th. Preparations in full swing at the National Museum in Manila, where President-elect Bongbong Marcos will take his oath of office at noon of June 30. While the threat level remains low, security officials taking no chances. Senior correspondent David Santos reports.
Heavily armed police units carrying out a simulation of a violent attack at the Rizal Park on Monday as part of the final rehearsals for the June 30 inauguration. Several blocks along the streets leading to the National Museum have been barricaded since Sunday. These include parts of P. Burgos and Taft Avenues, Finance Road, and General Luna Street. Several civilian and military trucks have also been stationed just outside the museum. Also on standby, special teams like the SWAT and counter-terrorism units that specialize on chemical or nuclear attacks. The gun ban now in effect all over Metro Manila until July 2nd. In a radio interview on Monday, the police say they are deploying more than 9,000 personnel, while the Coast Guard have started patrolling the water, including Manila Bay, to ensure the security and safety of those involved in the inauguration as well as the general public.
Ang instruction ni Admiral Abu ay maging vigilant sa lahat ng aspeto nitong kadabigan para hindi tayo malusutan kung sakaling may magtatangka talagang manggulo at gumamit ng karagatan at ng Pasig River.
Protest actions will only be allowed at the Liwasang Bonifacio in front of the National Post Office. Demonstrations outside this area will require permits. Violators could be arrested despite police assuring maximum tolerance.
Sabi ko nga marami pang pagkakataon para ihayag nyo yung inyong kalugin. Pero nakikiusap kami na napakahalaga nitong activist na to, napakahalaga nitong gagawin nito. Magpamarga ito sa history ng ating bansa. Huwag nyo naman sanang sirain at ipakita at ipahiya ang ating bansa.
So far, there are no plans to close down public spaces like Rizal Park, but public movement could be restricted, especially in areas near the National Museum. Like Manila, the PNP is hoping adjacent cities will also declare a non-working holiday on Inauguration Day to allow people to stay home and avoid being inconvenienced by the massive traffic rerouting arrangements. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
3 days before he steps down from office, President Rodrigo Duterte attends the oath-taking ceremony of his son and other newly elected government officials in Davao City. Sebastian Baste Duterte took his oath of office as the next city mayor. His mother, Elizabeth Zimmerman, and sister, outgoing city mayor and Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, were also in attendance, along with other family members. Just yesterday, President Duterte delivered what could be his shortest speech yet before thousands of supporters who gathered at the Quirino Grandstand in Manila to mark the end of his term.
Sambayang Pilipino, maraming salamat sa inyo.
Over a dozen performers sang the president's most loved songs at the event, which was entitled Salamat PRRD. The concert also featured a drone show and a fireworks display. Now, as Vice President Leni Robredo also prepares to step down from office on June 30th, the opposition leader passes on the torch to the next woman who will rise to become the highest elected official from their ranks. Anjo Alimario reports.
You are now the highest elected official sa opposition. And lahat kami masaya na ikaw yung natitirang humahawak ng ating bandila.
After her loss in the presidential race, outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo relinquishes her role as the leader of the opposition. Another woman will take on her role, Senator Risa Ontiveros. She was the lone opposition bet who made it to the Senate Magic 12. Robredo praises Ontiveros for using her position to give voice to the powerless and for pushing for good governance. She's confident Ontiveros will continue the opposition's cause.
Andito lang kami lagi magsusuporta sa iyo. Kami yung mga sundalo mo na ngayon, Sen. Risa. Kaya asahan mo yung aming kung paano mo sinuportahan yung buong sambayanan ng Pilipino. Ganon din yung suportang aasahan mo lahat sa amin.
Ontiveros says she'll still work with Robredo, other opposition leaders, parties and movements to redress the inequality on the ground.
Pararamihin natin ang mga Pilipinong nakikibahagi sa proseso ng demokrasya upang maramdaman ng mas marami pa ang mga resulta nito.
Like Robredo, Ontiveros will fight back harder against disinformation. She even issued a warning.
To all the dubious characters in the fake news universe, this time, we will not let your reckless disregard for truth slander our democracy, our country, ever again.
With just 3 days before Robredo steps down, her staff are busy emptying her office. Artworks donated during the campaign have been packed and segregated. Some will find a new home in her museum. Others will go to a fundraising event during the launch of her Angat Buhay NGO. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
A first-time senator is taking on the chairmanship of the Energy Committee amid soaring fuel prices. Senator-elect Raffy Tulfo says he also wants to be part of the Blue Ribbon panel. But for the outgoing Senate President, neophyte lawmakers like Tulfo should take it slow. More from Amor Santos.
Ganda. Tamang-tama yung height. Okay.
Incoming Senator Raffy Tulfo gets a feel of the session hall where lawmakers deliberate. It was his first time to visit the Senate on Monday, 3 days before assuming office. He was briefed by the Legislative Department and toured the Senate building. He's also taking a 2-week crash course at the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. Tulfo is poised to be chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy, a pivotal role amid rising fuel prices.
Nag-gather ako ng team of experts sa energy industry para pag-usapan yan, para bigyan ako ng guidance. Unang-una talaga, tatama sa sikmura ng ating mga kababayan ay yung tinatawag na systems loss, yung pagtaas ng kuryente, yung palaging brownout.
Tulfo says the panel will tackle the suspension of fuel excise tax, and incumbent committee head Sherwin Gatchalian will be his vice chairman. On the requested ayuda for the middle class,
I don't think so. There are data na nakita ko na 8 million Filipinos are still receiving below minimum wage. Yun dapat ang targetin ng ating pamahalaan na mabigyan ng ayuda. Yung mga nasa poverty line, wag yung middle class. Middle class can take care of themselves, I'm sure.
Tulfo is also set to chair the Committee on OFWs. He also wants to be part of the Blue Ribbon Committee, saying he has investigated erring government workers through his radio program for the past 2 decades. But as a broadcaster, he's not keen on raising the issue of press freedom with President-elect Bongbong Marcos.
Napakababaw mo niya. Bilang senator, I'm representing the whole nation, no longer the press, members of the press.
Other incoming senators will have an orientation here at the Senate on Tuesday. Outgoing Senate President Tito Soto has this advice for neophyte lawmakers.
Know your place. Pakiramdaman mo mabuti ang ikangay sitwasyon doon sa Senado. At wag mo nang sugod na sugod. Mas magandang makinig ka muna. Pag-aral ka. And then practice due diligence.
Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
It's not yet the end of the road for the joint oil and gas exploration deal between Manila and Beijing in the West Philippine Sea. Chinese officials say they're ready to work with the new Philippine government for negotiations. But as Tristan Odal reports, experts have different views on whether the Marcos leadership should revive the joint exploration talks.
The termination of the joint oil and gas exploration talks with China under President Rodrigo Duterte could give President-elect Bongbong Marcos a clean slate in terms of exploring the resources in the West Philippine Sea with other countries. Experts and diplomats say the challenge now is whether the next administration will continue to engage Beijing and find a common ground without compromising the Philippines' sovereignty. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says it is looking forward and ready to work with the new administration to advance the negotiations. China maintains that the joint oil and gas deal with the Philippines is, quote, the right way to manage maritime differences. In a virtual forum, the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute denounces the termination of the deal.
Giving it no say in the consequences thereof. The incoming president must, and we expect, will stand up to this travesty.
In a tweet, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin Jr. says the government must look back at what happened in the 3-year negotiation before giving the talks another shot. He adds details are important so that the deal will not be unconstitutional. Former DFA Chief Albert Del Rosario says Marcos should appoint foreign affairs and energy officials that are upright and patriotic. Del Rosario also cites the need for the Philippines to find energy sources. Fishers Group Pamalakaya wants the Marcos administration to shelve the talks on joint gas exploration with China. But for maritime expert J. Batong Bakal, the Marcos administration can always make a fresh start.
As long as the Duterte administration did not make any kind of apparently clear, binding, or legal commitments, then they can start fresh. Okay, so they can deal with the question of joint development from the very beginning, from the very basics.
Experts say it is important for the incoming Marcos administration to learn from the negotiations conducted by the Duterte administration to determine the parameters set by China. It is also important for Marcos to set some conditions and maintain status quo should negotiations resume under his watch. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
Officials are still waiting to find out if the Health Technology Assessment Council will approve a third dose for healthy 12 to 70 years old. That's amid lower booster vaccination among the elderly. Doctors already warn of waning immunity from primary vaccines, and early scientific findings say getting COVID again could increase health risks. Caroline Bodkin has more.
Alfie Ignacio had COVID infection in October, yet months after recovering, his body seems weaker. He gets more easily tired than usual, affecting his work as a delivery rider.
Hindi ko natatapos yung buong araw na biyahe. Sa ngayon, konti nakaka-recover naman na.
He's extra careful now not to get COVID again. A preprint study in the U.S. shows reinfection increases risk of death, hospitalization, and having at least one lingering effect of COVID infection. Authors said preventing reinfection is crucial. Other experts have yet to evaluate this study. While its points are valid, vaccine expert Dr. Nina Gloriani notes this study has not accounted factors like patients' medical condition. Infectious disease expert Dr. Jean Solantes says chances of reinfection and long COVID complications are higher among unvaccinated and unboosted. Solantes sees long COVID more in his elderly patients. Most common symptoms are fatigue and forgetfulness. Some get depressed or have difficulty sleeping.
This long COVID can also be dangerous and can complicate into other possible complications like heart attack, like stroke.
He says a second booster will prevent risk of reinfection and eventually complications in the heart and respiratory system among high-risk individuals. And for general population, a second booster. Solantes stresses the need for second-generation vaccines with improved effectiveness against new and emerging variants. Current vaccines are only based on the original SARS-CoV-2. So even those who had COVID before or are fully vaccinated can get infected with Omicron and its subvariants.
As long as these vaccines, we're using per-generation vaccines, there will always be breakthrough infection.
A WHO interim statement on June 17th points out the importance of using vaccines designed against Omicron as booster shot as it offers more protection. Omicron, with its subvariants, is the currently circulating variant of concern worldwide.
Nag-evolve si virus. So we are not just looking at Omicron. Ultimate goal na what we produce next should capture all, even yung future variants.
Vaccine makers are tweaking their formula to have Omicron-specific vaccines. Moderna recently announced its Omicron-containing booster shot showed superior antibody response against Omicron and fast-spreading subvariants BA4 and 5. Caroline Bonquin, CNN Philippines.
Entertainment news coming up. More BTS members embark on solo ventures, with one getting ready to release an album and another visiting Paris Fashion Week. More after the break.
power to protect Mother Earth, keeping it cleaner and greener to preserve our one and only home. Powering the good life. Meralco.
Fried chicken? Timplang happy! With easy-to-cook Magnolia Chicken Timplados. Iba't ibang sarap ng chicken, kaya. Anong Magnolia Chicken Timplados mo? Iba't ibang easy chicken sarap.
Kinto One, Toyota's global leasing service, gives you the freedom to move, to go where you want, the freedom to be productive, freedom to pursue your passion. Kinto One, powered by Toyota, lets you choose how you drive your life, giving you the freedom to enjoy what matters most. The freedom to drive worry-free is yours. Kinto One. Subscribe and drive.
For us to be able to move forward, infrastructure development should be a focus of any economic development program in the country in the next few years.
The objective is to improve transportation, mobility, and accessibility in our cities by seamlessly connecting or linking up all our road and rail networks, airports, and seaports. With this, we can decongest Metro Manila, accelerate and make more efficient the transportation of people and goods, improve access between cities and provinces, develop new economic growth centers, boost our local industries, enable tourism, create more jobs and business and livelihood opportunities, and allow everyone to have a better quality of life.
You're watching Newsnight. In Kpop, J-Hope of BTS unveils images for his first solo album, Jack in the Box. Pre-orders open today. The first single for the album comes out July 1st. Hobie will be the first in the group to release his own record since BTS announced a break earlier this month. K-pop fans also abuzz about these three Korean stars who graced Celine's menswear show for Paris Fashion Week. Lisa of Blackpink, V of BTS, and actor Park Bo-gum went to the event together. Lisa is a global ambassador for Celine. And on-screen to off-screen couples, Sonia Jin and Hyun Bin, are expecting their first child together. Yejin shared the good news online, saying they will take care of the precious life that came to them. The crash landing on new stars got married in March this year. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pio Ontiveros. Before we go, take a look at how a major automotive company hopes to achieve carbon neutrality for one of its plants by 2035.
In 2015, the Toyota Motor Corporation, based in Japan, launched the Toyota Environmental Challenge 2050. As part of this challenge, Toyota Motor Philippines embarked in a renewable energy initiative for its manufacturing plant in Santa Rosa, Laguna. Now, Toyota Motor Philippines has announced that their manufacturing plant will be carbon neutral by 2035, pulling forward the original goal by 15 years.
Toyota Motor Philippines is a manufacturing plant and we are responsible for CO2 emissions. No? That's why we embark on these challenges, which is actually mandated also by our principals in Japan. It's a continuous process. We started with 1 megawatt last 2018. And today, we are also inaugurating 0.5 megawatt. This is just an addition to the existing facilities that we have done. No?
Under the renewable energy pillar, Toyota Motor Philippines is increasing its solar arrays capacity to further its renewable energy utilization and reduce its CO2 emissions by as much as 1,400 ton CO2 per year.
This will help the country reduce our carbon emission for a sustainable future. And it also helps, of course, our need for fuel because this will be additional source of fuel that will reduce the need for the grid power.
Having a global icon in the automotive industry like Toyota
speaks a lot. We are hoping and hopefully that Toyota is starting to, or have started a trend in their transition to green energy.
We also encourage our suppliers, no, to do the same, even our dealers, no. So it's going to be joint effort among Toyota Group, so not only Toyota Motor Philippines. Yes.
With this initiative, Toyota Motor Philippines continues their drive on the road to plant carbon neutrality. I'm Jamie Harrell, CNN Philippines.
This program is brought to you by This program is brought to you by
BYKB Radio
When you get a good night's sleep, you wake up feeling refreshed and alert, ready to take on the day ahead. Restorative sleep can do wonders for your mind as well as your body. But a recent study shows that the Philippines has one of the highest rates of sleep deprivation in Asia, plaguing almost half of our population. Sleep deprivation affects memory, decision-making, the immune system, and even heart health in the long run. On the program today, we want to talk about ways to adopt better sleep behaviors and debunk popular myths about harmful ones. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to Met Talk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Just like the air that we breathe and the food that we eat, sleep is an essential part of our daily life. Now, our guests are here today to dispel some myths that may be damaging to our health. First, we have Dr. Patrick Moral. He's the head of the sleep unit at the Center of Respiratory Medicine at the UST Hospital. Also with us is Dr. Margaret May Maanyo. She's an adolescent medicine specialist from the Manila Medical Center, Manila. Now, in the past few years, there's been growing information on the importance of not just sleep, but quality sleep. But there's been a lot of misinformation as well, and this has led to some poor sleep habits for a lot of people. I'll start the conversation with Dr. Patrick. Now, starting with a myth that older people need less sleep than younger people. Is there any truth to this, Dr. Patrick?
As someone who's turned 50 years old already, it's not really true that our sleep is, we're required to have more sleep than younger people. In fact, older people tend to have less deep sleep and have more wake after sleep onset. There's no truth to that.
Now, it's important to know that insufficient sleep among older people can lead to accidents or other health problems. Now, we'll give more tips for a better night's rest later on in the show. But now, let's talk about a widespread myth, and that is that snoring is harmless. You might know someone who snores, you might be sleeping with someone who snores, or you might snore yourself. Now, it's an extremely common phenomenon and occurs in more than 50% of adult males and around 40% of adult women around the world. Now, for the most part, snoring may be insignificant, but for some, it may indicate a serious underlying medical condition. Dr. Patrick, let's talk about that. What happens when we snore? When is snoring sort of okay? And what should our viewers be concerned about?
For snoring, it's something that will be, as you mentioned, evident in the general population among males. So one of the concerns is that, is snoring abnormal? So when you hear snoring, it means that you have a vibration in your upper airway and there's narrowing. And this can be caused by medications, can be caused by obesity, and you have a lot of factors that can contribute to this. So primary snoring itself may not be harmful to an individual, but it increases your risks for hypertension. However, when this obstructs the airway significantly, that it diminishes the oxygen that goes in and prevents the carbon dioxide from going out, then it increases the risks also for heart attacks, strokes, So someone who snores and has these other problems, you do have to seek consult with your physician.
Now we often hear the phrase as well as I need to catch up on my sleep. Because you can't actually regain or catch up on lost sleep by sleeping more another time or the following day as well. Dr. Patrick, tell us more about this. Normally, if someone pulls out an all-nighter, sometimes a whole weekend of not sleeping at all, and they say that, I'll just catch up in the next 3 days, I'm going to sleep 3 days straight. Does this practice catch up or negate that period of lost sleep?
When we talk about a lack of sleep, we talk about sleep debt. So utang yun, no? So it means you owe sleep to yourself. So the thing is, it doesn't mean that if I did not sleep for 7 hours, I owe 7 hours. It can get compounded. So what is important is you really try to get as much sleep as possible. And if you foresee that you might be sleep deprived, you might do what we call already planned naps ahead of time. But just in case you lack the sleep, they say, as much as possible, still wake up at the same time every day, but you can sleep a little earlier to sort of catch up. But at the end of the day, prevention is still better than cure. So make sure you try to get as adequate a sleep as possible.
Now, Dr. Patrick, it was advised that the average person needs 7 to even 9 hours of sleep per day. So good quality sleep at that. How can you explain some people who just sleep for 5 hours a day pretty much their whole life and that's how they function? Are they at risk of any sleep deprivation, lack of sleep, even if that's how they regularly function?
We have people who are short sleepers, but as much as possible, we want to keep the sleep schedule between 5 to 9 hours. Less than 5 or more than 9 hours have been shown by studies to shorten lifespan. So do try to make sure that you get at least some sleep between 5 to 9 hours. And there are people who are, they call owls, who work better at night, and there are people who are larks, who really work better in the morning. So although we follow general schedules within, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of the circadian rhythm, we do have to contend with work. And some of us do have to work in off hours that where others are asleep, we have to be awake. So as much as possible, just make sure you try to get those 5 to 7. 7 hours would be good, or 8 hours would be good for most, but at least within 5 to 9 hours.
But ultimately, though, the more sleep deprived you are, the more we can become irritable, stressed, anxious, our mood changes if we lack quality sleep. Dr. Marga, please explain real quick how the lack of sleep can affect our mood and our mental health overall.
So basically, if we lack sleep, we are kind of moody, we tend to be irritable, we cannot focus on the things, so that will add to your stress and anxiety that you're not able to actually accomplish everything you need to, and you're worried about the mistakes you made, so it will add up to your stress, and generally it will affect how you work and your behavior throughout the day. So that is why it's important to have really sleep, so because in general it will affect your functioning, and your functioning will also affect your mental health.
Just as our sleep problems can lead to changes in mental health, our mental health can also impact our sleep. When we return, we'll discuss the science behind our dreams and our nightmares. We're your partner in healthcare. This is MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. Earlier on the show, we talked about some sleep myths that may be harming our health. Many of these poor sleep habits are a product of misinformation. But sometimes the ordinary stresses of daily life can also lead to disrupted sleep. They may even trigger what are so-called nightmares. Now, Dr. Patrick, to better understand these nightmares, let's first talk about how we dream. Can you explain that portion or the REM cycle for us?
To explain the REM cycle, just understand that sleep can be divided into 2 parts, the non-REM or the REM. The REM is a part where we lose all muscle tone, but there's a lot of activity in the brain. So when we have dreams, dreams may become most vivid during REM sleep or our sleep. So if you have dreams that you remember are quite bizarre, they most likely occur during REM sleep. So dreams are basically any thoughts, dreams, emotions that you actually feel during sleep. And they, as we said, it can occur in any stage of sleep, but they're most vivid in the REM sleep.
How about nightmares? Nightmares can happen to adults. That can frequently happen. Is this normal to happen in children and older children as well?
In terms of nightmares is the most common type of your REM-related parasomnia. So when you say parasomnia, and this is undesirable phenomena that occurs predominantly during sleep. It occurs in 5% approximately of the population, more in children than in adults. So onset is usually before 10 years old, but those with later onset is actually suggest psychological causes such as anxiety, distress, and trauma. Now, nightmare content is actually reflective of the developmental milestone and stage. So for adolescents, there's more about social, academic, occupational, and safety-related concerns.
Now let's talk about a little bit about how sleep actually works. Dr. Patrick, could you tell us or explain to us the process of us going into sleep and what determines us waking up?
Don't think of sleep as simply restorative. There's a lot of things, as mentioned earlier, like hormone production, and in terms of control of hormones for your hunger and satiety. These occur during nighttime. Now, as we transfer from one stage of sleep to the other, there may be things that happen. Feeling paralyzed, not being able to move, and sometimes imagining something like a character jump over you. It's called sleep paralysis. And this happens as we jump from one stage of sleep to another. So let's say we jump from N to REM, because in REM we have sort of muscle paralysis. We will experience that unless we move one finger, that's the only time we can move our body. So the folklore that someone is out there to try and kill you at night is actually explainable by biological reasons.
Now, Dr. Patrick, what about sleepwalking naman? What's the explanation for this? How does this happen? Is this something that parents of children who sleepwalk should be concerned about, or even adults for that matter?
All right. I think this is more the domain of Dr. Marga, because most of the sleepwalkers occur during adolescence. Now, if it occurs during later in adulthood, you might have to investigate for other matters. But however, if it's present from childhood and there's a genetic predisposition, it may be exacerbated. I remember I had a medical clerk, a student, who, when she went on duty on the hospital, started sleepwalking again. What's the cause of that? Sleep deprivation, stress, these things can precipitate it again. So this happens paradoxically during the deepest stage of sleep, or N3. That's why it's called parasomnia. You have a lot. They have sleepwalking, sleep talking, some have head banging. So there are so many things. So some people even cook at night and eat without knowing that they're doing that. So you do have a lot of disorders that are similar to sleepwalking as well.
Now, Dr. Marga, I'd like to talk about adolescents and sleep deprivation and how this may affect their overall mood, their overall sense of well-being, maybe even certain conditions like depression. Is there any link with depression and lack of sleep with adolescents?
When you look deeply into the DSM-5 criteria for depression, one of the symptoms there is active sleep deprivation. So this has to be present for more than half a week or for at least 2 weeks for it to become significant. It has to be the other symptoms of depression, such as sadness, anhedonia, also overeating, and the other symptoms. So having lack of sleep, actually, it affects your mental health. It makes you too tired to actually do anything. And when you have depression, you actually don't have any energy to move at all. So your tendency is to sleep so that you're good, that your mood will return. So basically, it could be a manifestation also of a mental problem such as depression if it's occurring too much, or you're using it as an escape for your normal task. So when your sleep affects your normal tasks, such as your activities with your friends, family, and school, it is already something that you should seek a doctor about.
So are these some of the overt symptoms, Dr. Marga, some of the physical effects of the lack of sleep?
Lack of sleep may make you have difficulty in concentrating. You can make more mistakes, adding to your stress in your schoolwork that you're not able to accomplish everything you need to do. So it could actually affect your schoolwork and hence add to your stress. The most common stress of our teenagers nowadays is the ACADS. They're having difficulty actually balancing both academics and their workload. When they're at home, they have to do their schoolwork at the same time with the other stuff. So basically, it's because they're having a kind of balance, having difficulty to balance. That's why they're more stressed. And if they're sleepy and tired, they cannot concentrate and they're not able to do. So it actually adds to their mental stress and the mental health difficulties they're experiencing right now.
What are the proven ways to sleep better at night? More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on Let's Talk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk.
From the stress of the pandemic, work, and everyday challenges, sleep can be elusive. While we may not be able to control some of these stresses that affect a good night's rest, we can adopt better habits to encourage it.
Dr. Patrick, let's talk about power naps. How effective are they? How long should we nap so that we don't feel drowsy throughout the day?
You can have either planned naps when you know you're going to be sleep deprived, or you can do emergency naps when you're really sleepy. So remember, we've been talking about sleep. Sleep deprivation, or when you're somnolent, is also a public health hazard. You can create an accident. So do make sure that if you're sleepy, the solution is not to take a lot of coffee, but to take a nap. The nap should normally not be less than 20 minutes, or else it's not restorative, and not more than 30 minutes, or it may disrupt the sleep at night.
Now, let's talk about some small lifestyle changes which can also help you better get good sleep at night. Dr. Marga, what are some good tips in order to get a good night's sleep? Does diet a big role in the quality of sleep that a person gets?
Diet is also important. So basically what we advise is to avoid taking caffeine or food with caffeine such as soda, tea after dinner. So we should avoid these things. And at the same time, before you go to bed, avoid eating large meals because you will be uncomfortable sleeping if your tummy is digesting a lot of food. And aside from those food and beverage, it's also advisable to avoid nicotine and alcohol in the evening because this may interrupt your sleep.
Now, Dr. Patrick, let's talk about some of the sleeping aids available. So there are sleeping aid supplements such as melatonin, which is very popular nowadays, and it can range all the way up to actual sleeping pills. Could you explain to our viewers the difference between these and how can these help with someone who is having trouble sleeping?
All right, so I'm sure you're familiar, as you mentioned, with melatonin. Melatonin is readily available over the counter. It's not considered as a drug per se. That's why you can buy it. As much as possible, don't exceed 10 milligrams. Now, remember, this is not advocating self-prescription, but it may help. So it's a natural hormone that we find in our brain that promotes sleep. Now, if this doesn't work, sometimes your doctors will provide you antihistamines. These are anti-allergies, and they provide you ones with sedating effects, the ones that can help you sleep. If these don't work, then they can move up to sedatives, either benzodiazepines. I'm sure you've heard of maybe diazepam, something like that, or non-benzodiazepines. So your doctor will try to find out what is best for you. You did mention something about alternatives. We do look at things like people do take valerian root, St. John's wort. Just be careful in checking whether they interact with any of your other existing medications.
Now, Dr. Marga, what are some of the risks of self-medicating, especially when it comes to sleeping aids? For someone who is having trouble sleeping, they see someone who is taking this and they take that medication hoping that it would have the same effect for them. What could you advise, especially for the young adolescents?
We really don't advise self-medication. That is one thing that we should put into our minds always. So for those who self-medicate, always read first. What are the side effects? Because each medication, it has good effects, it also has side effects. So also always read about the side effects and always ask your doctor if this pill or the sleeping pill will be good for you. Because you do not it might be different effects for different people. It might not work as effectively for you. So always important to have someone in the medical field give you some advice before you actually take the sleeping medication.
Dr. Patrick, what can you say about our viewers who may use alcohol as their sleeping aid?
So very small amounts of alcohol may actually promote sleep. So, for people, the Europeans take a small amount of wine, that may help. But anything beyond that fragments your sleep pattern. So instead of really promoting good sleep, it actually promotes sleep disturbance. So do avoid taking alcohol, maybe aside from your usual nightcap of just one glass of wine. And if you do want to promote sleep. But beyond that, I think you might be seeing another specialist later on.
And with that, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Patrick Moral and Dr. Margaret May Maanyo, for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your expert insights. We hope by dispelling these sleep myths and giving these simple but effective tips on good sleep habits, we help promote good quality sleep, and as a result, your overall well-being has been improved as well. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time here on MedTalk Health Talk.
RPN Regional AM radio stations nationwide welcomes CNN Philippines, a first on radio.